start this session, even though it's a very somber one, without regard for a day that could have been raining. It was not. It's beautiful outside, and it is. So I'm going to start again. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. That is so helpful. My name is Jim Stowe, Director of the Office of Human Rights, and we're so glad that you're here. And I am actually standing in for our county executive, who is ill. And so I've been asked just to say a few words. I won't be giving his comments, but just a few words of welcome to everybody. First of all, welcome to all of you, to all of our elected officials. Thank you for being here. I know you all are busy and been trying to struggle with the budget and all those kind of things going on. So thank you all for being here. We did have regrets from a number of our council members who could not be here today. And so I want to acknowledge those persons again in their absence. We want to thank them always for their support. And also I'm very, very pleased to have some folks here who are former council members. I'm trying to see if I see Craig. He had to cut out. Okay. All right. And also did hear from Hans Reamer this morning, again, expressing his support and ongoing gratitude for the work that's been going on in his absence as well. Every mind must learn the whole lesson for itself, must cover the whole ground. What it does not see, what it does not live, it cannot know. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Even though the county executive is not here today, and again, I know we all wish him well, if he were here, I think he would agree with the words of Emerson. We have to be willing as a community to pull back the layers and examine our past with all the wonderful qualities and its imperfections. And in the case of our gathering today, a violent past. In our exploration and our journey as a county, we will also discover some truth. A truth about that violent past. Truth about where we have been and who we were, who we are today, and who we need to be in the future. All should serve as a reminder that we ourselves, the site that's right outside these doors, should be a reminder that we never want to ever return to that place of hatred and bigotry and violence that occurred to Mr. John Diggs Dorsey and Mr. Sidney Randolph here in Rockville and Mr. George Peck in Poolesville. As I say from this podium often, we are better than that. So we extend very special, again, thanks and greetings to our speaker, Dr. Legg, and her parents, John and Sally Burrell, that have them, both of them here with us today as well. So let's give a round of applause. And as I mentioned to all of our council members, please stand up. I'm told that you're not often on that side of this whole podium, so please stand up as you would if you were part of the audience. Councilman Luque, Councilman Jawando, and Councilman Fraser. Thank you all so much for your support and your presence. I also have a few of our directors out there. Director Ben Stevens, please stand up for our Department of Correction and Rehabilitation. And while he's not here, David Dice and his folks from General Services, and Randy Hawkins, who were just instrumental. Either one of those folks here still? Okay, this just could not have gotten it done without DGS. And so we want to make sure we do acknowledge them as we go. So one last group of folks to also acknowledge is our Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission. Please stand up and be recognized. Thank you so much. And I'm going to now ask our chair to come up, and she will then move the program forward at this point. Again, come on up, Madam Chair. Treva, actually, I call you Hopkins, but it's supposed to be Brother LeBroy. Brother LeBroy, and his there is right there. Okay, very good. That's the husband now, so I'll make sure I put that in that name. Okay, now it's Treva Hopkins Labar. Did I get it right, brother? Did I get it right? All right, very good. All right, we're good. We're good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Stone. Thank you for those words. I'm so inspired by your words and by the event today because, you know, I'm 6 generations Montgomery County. Woohoo! And so to be part of a county that spends so much time in this remembrance and reconciliation and making sure that we understand the history of this county and that we don't try to hide it, we don't try to forget it, we remember it and we use it as a compass on how we're going to move forward. So I'm just inspired by all of this, and I'm inspired to be part of this commission. And before I bring up the first speaker, I just want to also recognize that we have our Maryland delegate in the House, Gregory Wilms, and I want to recognize him. Thank you so much for taking time out to join us. And Greg and I have a family history from years ago, so he's very familiar with the generations of Johnsons, McDonald's, Hopkins in this county because the Wilms, I think, Wilms are right there with us. All right, so with that, I think we'll move and move to our next set of remarks, and we'll have Vice President Counsel Will Girondo come up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Treva. It's fun sitting. I sat there on purpose because I was like, we don't get to sit there often. We just yesterday did the straw votes on the budget, and which is kind of to not use jargon. That's kind of when we're actually agreed on what's the budget is going to be, and so we've been working really hard on that, and so it's really good to be here to remember the day after that. I want to thank Treva for stepping up. Jason and I were talking that the best job, and I know Councilman Friedson says this a lot, the best job on any board or commission is former chair. And so he's in that very vaulted position. But I also thank Treva that she stepped up and she said, we're going to see how this goes. And I said, you know, because this is a labor of love, but I think there's no better person. You mentioned 6 generations to be chairing this right now. And to all the commission members, thank you for all your hard work and dedication. To Jim Stowe for staffing and his team. We have Frederick Hawkins here from the African American Advisory Group. And you know my colleagues, Councilmember Friedson and Councilmember Lukey are here. I want to thank Councilman Rice, who had to run off, and he's running Manna Food Bank now, as some of you may know. And it's tough times right now. One of the things we passed in the budget was additional food resources because we know more people are hungry. We've had a 32% increase in people experiencing homelessness from year to year. The lines at our hubs, which we started during COVID, are back to be much more full than they were. They're overflowing, they're long, and we know we're heading into a tough time right now. We're in a tough time, and we're heading into even more of a tough time. So it's even more important that we're here to kind of remember what happened and why it happened and how it's connected to what's happening now. I was mentioning to some folks outside that, you know, as there were 3 documented lynchings in this county, right? I'll often say it's really important to say documented because we have this county is still very rural, but imagine it in the 1800s. And there was a lot happening that was not captured. And that's anywhere, but you know, so we know that there are other stories, and I always think we should remember those, even though we don't know. There wasn't an article written. They weren't all pulled out of a jail. It happened, and we want to remember them as well. But of the 3 documented lynchings, 2 that occurred with men being dragged out of this building, as a black man, I think of that often walking in here, quite often. I was talking to Craig. There have been 3 black men to serve on this council, ever. Ike Leggett, Craig Rice, and myself. And I think about the awkward synergy of that. So I kind of I haven't said this to anyone ever, actually, publicly. I'm looking forward to the day when we cross that threshold where we are on the other side in the positive ledger of someone being able to serve this county that would outnumber the amount of black men who have been lynched here. I think about not only that it happened, but the psychology of the people who participated in it, and the permissive nature of this community that allowed for it to happen. To drag people out of a building that was a public building. We have our head of corrections here. He knows how important in the sanctity and the rule of law that you are securing individuals, residents who have been accused of or committed crimes, but they are due process. And the fact that that would be violated, the fact that it would be a celebratory event, the fact that it occurred across this city and county, and people were, then I fast forward and I think, because history is so important, because you have to remember why you're remembering, and we're remembering for all the reasons, and that was beautifully put by Jason outside, for all those reasons. But we're also remembering because it is directly connected to help us provide the roadmap and connective tissue to where we find ourselves today. And we've had many unfortunate deaths of young black people and others in this country. But I think of one in particular a lot, and that's Tamir Rice, who was a 12-year-old boy in Ohio who was playing with a toy gun, something that I have done, probably many people in this room have done, at a park, and was shot and killed within 30 seconds when an officer arrived. And it's not so much that he was shot and killed. That's horrible, of course, and there was no accountability in this case. But it's that when the officer arrived and when it was reported into 911, they said, we have an 18-year-old boy or 18-year-old man, black male, with a gun, right? And then when you connect that to, okay, well, he was 12. If you've seen pictures of him, he was a young boy. Why was he perceived to be 18? Why was he perceived to be as such a threat? It's connected to the same intentional work that was done over hundreds of years in this country to dehumanize, to devalue, to make seem dangerous, that contributed to his death. And so the same things, I think about the psychology of the people who dragged Mr. Sidney Randolph and who dragged George Peck out. What they were thinking, they obviously perceived a threat. They perceived something to be those men to be less than human. And I think we have to remember that and not be scared to draw that connective tissue, because the same things that led to their deaths are still leading to deaths today. And not even that, those are the most extreme cases. They're leading to health disparities when you show up at the doctor and we don't think that you're in pain. They lead to housing inequality when we don't think you can qualify for the loan. Go down the list, educational inequity. And we have to be vigilant in working against all those things, and you can't do it if you don't recognize the psychology that's still at play for so many. And so part of the work of this commission is to document that, to remember that, to remember Mr. John Diggs Dorsey and Mr. Sidney Randolph, who were taken out of this building, to also remember Mr. George Peck in Poolesville, but to also recommit ourselves to eradicating the thought process, the mentality that we see present, unfortunately, in the White House right now, in a lot of this administration, and in our community that's still here, that seeks to dehumanize, to devalue, and to disconnect. Last thing I'll say, we do and I want to thank our racial equity manager, Selena, who's here as well, Selena Singleton. She deserves a round of applause for all the work that she's doing. We do an exercise in racial equity training. If you've done this, you may be familiar with it, where they put a bunch of big Post-its on the wall, and they write down black, white, Asian, Latino. I've done this probably 20 times, and they give everyone a marker, and they say, okay, and it's usually a group, maybe this size, maybe a little smaller, and they say, okay, I want you to go up there and write down everything you've ever heard about those people. And I've seen it done 20 times. Without fail, the black one is always overflowing. Not that you necessarily believe these things, but that you've heard them, right? With negative, it's 80% negative. Lazy, dangerous, violent, go down the list, right? The white one is mostly positive, has less on it. The Asian one, model minority stuff, mostly, but less on it. The Latino one has negative things on it as well, but it's usually not as much. It's a reminder that we all have these biases. We know them, we're aware of them. We have to actively work against them. We have to actively work against them because they have real life consequences for people. And so I just went a little longer than I wanted to today, but I want to thank this commission. I'm so honored to have played a small role with Councilmembers Reamer and Rice in putting the bill forward to do this. I think we've just scratched the surface of what we can do with this commission, and we've just scratched the surface of how we apply it to our current present day and how we take those lessons and tie it to the inequities of today and use that to motivate us to make sure everyone has opportunity here in Montgomery County. So thank you so much, and congratulations on this next step in the journey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember, for that. Vice President, Councilmember, for those words. I'm really thankful for your message of making sure that we don't sort of change the dialogue or create these stereotypes against specific individuals. And I think it's so important, especially at this time, as there's this push to put these negative connotations with the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm saying it. And so I think we got to pay attention to that and make sure that the definitions of these words don't change, they don't turn into negatives, and that we are responsible for making the corrections when we hear people using them in a negative way. So with that, I'll invite Councilmember at Large Andrew Friedson to come up and give some remarks.
Well, I am Andrew Friedson. I'm proud to be the immediate past president of the Montgomery County Council, the greatest three words in all boards, commissions, nonprofits, and even county councils. I start with a joke, but this is a somber occasion, an important occasion, and one that I'm just really proud to be here to see. Selena and I have talked quite a bit about how do we appropriately reflect and ensure that we confront the past of this building, the center of the legislative work of our county government, at a place that was home to two of the documented murders by lynching, racial terror acts that we have media reports about, reflecting a much broader engagement of racial terror that took place in our community and in our county. And I will just express my deep appreciation to the commission for doing this in such a thoughtful and purposeful and intentional way. It's not easy to do, and you have threaded that needle, and I'm just really grateful and really appreciative of that. I talk a lot about Frederick Douglass's line, only do with the past what we can make it useful for the present and the future. That's what this work is. That's what remembrance and reconciliation means. It is doing with the past, not to talk about the past in the past. It's to do with the past what we can make it useful for the moment that we're living in today, understanding that we can't talk about where we're going unless we confront where we have been and how we got here. And, I think a lot when I think about Mr. John Diggs Dorsey and Mr. Sidney Randolph, who were abducted, kidnapped from the Rockville jail, the place that was supposed to protect the community. That's what jails are intended to serve as, became itself the perpetrator. And I think quite a bit about how the choice that we make can change the trial by jury of your peers, a foundational aspect of American life, of our constitutional rights, of our human dignity as a community, to a lynch mob. And that's what happened here. The protect to the perpetrator, the trial by jury to the lynch mob. I was thinking a lot, I thought it was going to be raining. I was thinking a lot about the symbolism of rain. I've talked about it a lot in the Scotland AME Zion Church project that I've worked on that was flooded. And I talk about the rain, and we focus a lot about the rain as this inevitable thing. And of course, rain is inevitable. But the question is, what do we do with it? Rain can sustain us, it can bring life, or it can destroy us. But the choice is ours. And that's what our past is as well. The same is true of the sun. Channeled in the right way, the sun brings warmth, and it brings sustenance, and it brings everything that we want. But in the wrong way, it can destroy you. It can be too hot. It can burn your skin. It can do all the things that we want to protect ourselves from. The choice, in fact, is ours. So I think a lot also, the words that have always struck me from a Tony Cohen presentation where he talked quite a bit of by persons unknown. And I think a lot about what that means. And that means those people were known, but nobody wanted to say who they were. But more importantly than that, the people who those folks were is actually less important than the fact that they were referred to as persons unknown. Because the whole community were the people unknown. Whether they were the ones actually doing the abduction and the kidnapping, or whether they were the ones that were actually carrying out the actual act of terror, or whether they were there in the mob cheering it on, whether they were marching in the streets, or whether they were watching from their porches. The persons unknown is all of us in our community, and the past and the need to reconcile that past is the work of all of us as well. That's why this work is so important, to reclaim these stories, to have their names in front of this building, to ensure that the dignity that they were robbed, the human dignity that was kidnapped from this space, from this place, from this ground, is out in front, that they are given the dignity of the flower bed and the pathway that they were denied in their life, that was robbed of them in their time. In our time, we have a responsibility to lift up their story, to talk about them, to give them Mr. in front of their names, because Mr. represents the human dignity that they deserve, that they didn't get, that all of us should have, and that all of us must ensure that each of us provides to everybody moving forward. So I'm just really honored to be here. This is the work that we're doing today. This is the work of the Josiah Henson Museum, for us to reclaim his story, one of the great Montgomery County and Maryland residents whose story was taken from him, and now we're reclaiming it as a community to tell his story in his words, not in somebody else's words. None of our stories are someone else's to tell. It's the important work that we're doing at the Scotland AME Zion Church and in Emery Grove and in communities across the county to make sure that not only are we ensuring that we don't erase Black history, which is Montgomery County's history, which is our country's history, which is our community's history, but that we allow and preserve the stories in the words of the people who were there and who lived it themselves, and that we protect the structures that tell the stories so that we can reconcile the past and we can ensure that we tell the full story of who we are, how we get here, and where we're going from here. So thank you for all of the work to Treva and to Jason and to the entire commission, to the Office of Human Rights and Jim Stowe, and to the commission, the Human Rights Commission, to everybody who's been part of this critical works, to one of my favorite people, Delegate Wims, who, speaking of someone in whose family has lived this, Jason Green as well. It's just an honor to be here to be with you and to share space with you and to ensure that your family's stories, our county's story, our community's history is told in a way that provides the dignity that it was not provided in the times of our past. So thank you so much for this work.
Thank you so much, Councilmember, for your words. I really appreciate those words, and this notion of making sure that we provide the dignity needed for the experiences that the gentleman experienced outside, in addition to the undocumented lynchings that we're sure that took place. And so with that, I invite all of you all to, when you go back outside and look at that space, to really use it as a reflection, because it does uplift their names, say their names, and invite all of your friends and families to say their names so that they can be remembered and that we can keep them and all of the unknowns in our heads and our spirits, and make sure that they get recognized. So with that, I would like to invite District 1 member delegate Greg Wims to come up and give some remarks. 39, I'm sorry, 39. Gotcha, sorry, 39. I'm new, I get a break.
Thank you. Well, hello, everyone. And I'm going to be brief because I think there's some refreshments and so after. But it is very important that I got the opportunity today, and thank you. And I said we're family. We go back 6 or 7 generations. I now know that I'm 8th generation, and that's what I want to talk about. But before that, I wanted to say thank you to the commission. Thank you for all of you, the council members that started early, because without this history being told, we could maybe repeat it, especially what's happening now on the national level. We really don't know what might happen over the next 4 years. So thank each and every one of you, Mr. Stowe and your staff and all of you. And I'm going to just take 2 minutes to just give a brief history. And Tony Cohen, his name was mentioned, told me, most of you know me, and you know me as Greg Wims, the volunteer, so forth. But when I got elected, Tony, and I'm District 39, Montgomery Village, Germantown, a little bit of Clarksburg, a little bit of Gaithersburg. He said, Greg, do you realize that you're actually the first elected official who's black from Montgomery County that's a descendant of freed slaves? So we have Will, we have Ike, we have Craig, we have all the others, but I didn't know that. And that sort of tells you how important this commission is. What I'm getting at, Trina maybe didn't know the whole history of everything growing up because our parents didn't talk about it, and grandparents because they were afraid. To be honest, it was all in their heart. And see Jason and his grandmother's in heaven now, 106 years old. She probably knew some of the family members that we're talking about. But I did want to say that I just found out, not from Tony, but from my cousin who is now 98 years old, has half of her memory. She said, Greg, do you know what your grandmother's name was? Because I never met my grandmother. She said her name was May Randolph Wims. Her dad is George Washington Wims, and all of them lived where the college is now, Montgomery College at Germantown, but that globe, they were like tenant farmers, I guess you would say, after slavery. So when we dug a little deeper, I'm thinking, and I'm going to talk with Tony Cohen to do more research, that maybe my grandmother knew Mr. Randolph because her last name is Randolph, and back then it wasn't that many Randolphs. So it may be actually history, but I had no idea. And this is what I'm getting at. So I want to thank all of you for what you're doing and what you have done and will continue to do with the markers, continue with the history, because it means so much to us. And for you and your children and grandchildren coming out of the Kensington area, this means so much. And Jason, you in the area there in Darnestown. So with that, I'm just saying thank you to everyone, and we're going to continue to dig into the history so that we can find out the long legacy starting from those who were slaves and became free here in Montgomery County. And so with that, thank you, everyone, and hopefully I didn't take too long, Jim. Thank you very much.
So I just learned something new because my great-grandmother's Randolph. So we really are cousins. But historically, Greg he actually worked with my grandmother as a school teacher, right? Yeah. So anyway, that's a connection from years ago. So it was nice to hear that. So I think we are related. Okay. So with that, I'm excited and honored to introduce our speaker. So I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Bobby Legg. She is a PhD diplomat for the American Academy of Experts in Trauma and Traumatic Stress. Dr. Legg is a highly respected scholar of Arizona State University, School of Social Work, specializing in trauma and historical reconciliation. And her powerful testimony has served as a beacon of truth and healing. Her courage in sharing her family's legacy and involvement in the tragic lynching of Sidney Randolph with the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission reflects a profound commitment to transparency and justice. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Bobby Legg.
Thanks. It's really an honor to be here, and I don't know how to thank everyone enough for all the work that made this possible. And I just mean for putting the information together. It was just 3 years ago that I found information, but in years past, nothing would have been done with it, except I was able to hop on the internet and quickly go, wow, what year was my great-grandmother there? Where was this? And find all of the information so quickly because of the work all of you have done in history, in writing. So all of a sudden I could go, oh my goodness, that's what happened. So I'll go through my story. And I also want to say, it feels good to be here in a very odd way. I've spent at least half my life in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. It's where I grew up. Spent, 10, 15 years working with Maryland youth. Sorry, you're not going to think highly of me, like the Crownsville State Hospital campus. So I came here a lot for juvenile services and foster care hearings at this courthouse complex, all with no knowledge of my family history. So I'll go through a bit for my family history and how things came for me. And I'm just so thankful that putting things together can help change things today, because that's what needs to be done. Governor Wes Moore says, loving your country doesn't mean lying about its history. For me, loving my family doesn't mean lying about its history. 3 years ago, without any previous suspicion, I discovered that my ancestors led a brutal attack and murder of an innocent man, Mr. Sidney Randolph. I live in Phoenix. It was a hot summer day, the end of the pandemic. I came home and my uncle had gone to Kinko's and printed out my great-grandmother's memoir. Got home and I started reading it. And the beginning was about furniture and like where she lived. She had recorded it on with the help of my great uncle on cassette tapes. She had recorded it with my great uncle during the 1980s. During the 1980s, I was a kid. All of my childhood memories are going to visit my great grandmother at her home. She had a cozy home in DC, not too far from Washington National Cathedral. I remember crawling up on her bed, or being my mom helping us be exactly on top of the quilt so she could see us. Her vision was failing and she didn't have much mobility. So we would be on her bed. And then usually after we visited, we would go to the National Zoo, and she would always tell us to say hello to the giraffes. They were her favorite animal. And so we would leave. But now I know during those same years, my great-grandmother, sometime after her 95th birthday, gave a clear testimony of Mr. Randolph's lynching. She identifies that her uncle, Mr. Alec Carlisle, among with other men in positions of power, led the white mob that attacked and killed Mr. Randolph and spread racial terror throughout the region. My great-grandmother was 11 years old at the time of the brutal lynching. My great-grandmother describes that after her father died, her mother worked as a school teacher in Washington, D.C., and at times my great-grandmother would stay with her grandparents in Gaithersburg. In her memoir, she reports events stating that it was her Uncle Alec, along with other important men about town. They blackened their faces and went in search of the Negro. He was in jail in Rockville. In the dark of the early morning, they got him out of jail. And this is all her direct quotes. I don't know how, but they did. And they drove him down the road a little bit, and they tied him to the tree, and they lynched him. She reports that Alec Carlisle provided the herdic, which is like the wagon. I had to look it up. I didn't even know. I don't know about you, but I haven't used the word herdic recently. So the wagon that was used, and following, Alec Carlisle provided the herdic that was used, and that following the lynching, he then carried a gun in fear of retaliation from the black community. My great-grandmother reports that her aunt would identify, quote, the tree where the man was hung whenever she visited. Sidney Randolph's life was stolen by self-righteous white men who believed they were greater than the justice system. They robbed him of his safety, and they robbed him of his very breath and ended his life. Their actions spread paralyzing fear across the black community and extended that fear to any persons who allied with black citizens. Racial terror was a tyranny they used to choke off life, not only from the victims, but to their families and communities and loved ones who dared to believe they had a right to exist. We don't know if Sidney Randolph had any children. What we do know is that my ancestor and the mob of influential white men stopped his future. They robbed him of future love, future education, and future children. Meanwhile, my ancestors continued to be influential business leaders throughout Montgomery County. My family went on to have generations of children with educational and career opportunities. Accountability of the abuser is needed for justice. What would have been different in my family should my great-great-uncle have faced appropriate criminal charges for his actions? Well, he likely would have been in jail and faced an expensive legal battle. The toll, the emotional and financial, of having family members incarcerated is immense. I wonder if legal accountability occurred, would that have affected my great-grandmother's ability to go to college, which she did, or buy a home, which she did, or to have children, which she did. It is reasonable to assume that I have benefited from my great-great-uncle never facing criminal charges. On a larger scale, it is reasonable to assume that the communities in Maryland and across this country were impacted. White communities had a reinforced sense of power, flexing their ability to never be challenged. Black communities faced unimaginable trauma affecting their beliefs, their emotional constitution, and physiological responses. The physical and psychological torture changed the emotional, financial, and educational health of Black communities. I extend my most heartfelt apology for the egregious hate crime that was committed and took the life of Mr. Sidney Randolph. He was an innocent man traveling through Montgomery County. He was brutally attacked and beaten by two men who prejudicially profiled him and began the accusations that preceded his detainment and his lynching. Those two men, who I believe are my relatives, began a hellscape that Sidney Randolph had to endure. Mr. Randolph experienced the most disgusting, heinous, and sickening sides of humanity during his final days. My heart can only hope he went very quickly to a place of peace and eternal love. To be apologetic for the actions my ancestors took is an emotional state, but it does not bring repair to the generations of Maryland families that have been grossly harmed by racial terror. Accountability is important. This history has not been publicly shared, to my knowledge, since 1896. Why? For me as a white woman who works towards equality, I do want to know why. My great-grandmother was raised by a strong mother who was a fervent suffragette, a suffragette who fought for women to have equality. My great-grandmother was married in the Unitarian Universalist Church, a group known for advocacy on social justice issues. In my grandfather's written works in the 1990s, presumably after he knew about his mother's confession of this lynching, he wrote and called out the beating of Rodney King by law enforcement and the unjust verdict that followed. With these actions related to social justice, I do want to know why was so much silence kept. I speak my truth and my great-grandmother's report of this lynching because I believe we are only as sick as our secrets. I am deeply grateful that my great-grandmother, in her last years of life, chose to speak her memory and knowledge of this heinous crime. In her closing years, she chose to clearly name her uncle, Alec Carlisle, as a lead assailant in the homicide of Mr. Sidney Randolph. I believe generations have been harmed by racial terror in Montgomery County and throughout the United States. I believe restitution is appropriate, necessary, and essential for healing and shared growth and prosperity. I believe emotional health, job opportunities, homeownership, and educational opportunities were all directly harmed by racial terror. I believe we can build a more just society by actively supporting mental health care, education, financial resources, and homeownership of those adversely affected, both directly and indirectly, by racial terror that was directed at Black communities. My great-grandmother stated that Alec Carlisle was, quote, good friends of the colored people, and that, quote, on election days he had a way of finding a bottle of gin here and there for a vote. She stated, quote, they all loved him. I believe rehabilitation of racial relations in our country must address the core beliefs that give rise to these statements and these behaviors. There is nothing kind, friendly, or loving of having persons in power engage with persons of a marginalized community in a manipulating manner to solidify their ongoing reign in a position of power. I ask that all of us who descend from oppressors have the courage and humility to look at history and contemporary relations. All of us with fair skin can tell stories of our own struggles. We seek that validation, right? Have you been in a community when you say something and every white person goes, oh no, but my family had it hard. And we always seek that validation that somehow we did. I believe it takes humility. It takes humility to acknowledge the inhumane actions of past generations. And it's an important step in realizing the changes we need to make today to make a healthy community for all. I'm thankful for the work of Montgomery County Council the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I extend my gratitude to the citizens, governmental leaders, academics, and advocates who have made all of this work possible. I give my gratitude to the Maryland and Montgomery County Lynching Memorial Project, who support truth, reconciliation, and healing of this horrible past. Most of all, I extend my love and gratitude to the descendants of victims and their communities. You have endured relentless trauma through generations. May we all see you and hear you. May we step into a place of deep and humble understanding. And may we work together for a future filled with greater healing and health. As part of her great wisdom, Ida B. Wells stated, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." I hope that my sharing today brings one bit of light to our history. Thank you.
I know this may not be the normal thing that we stand up and salute the person who would just share that with us, but let's make an exception. Let's stand up and again salute again Dr. Bobby Legg for sharing that with us. Please. Thank you so much. Also, you need to know that Dr. Legg took a red eye to be here today. She is just returning from the continent of Africa, going to the continent of Africa when she leaves here. And so this is a big, big, big lift. I said, can we do anything? She said, absolutely not. I want to come and contribute what I can to what you all are doing in Montgomery County. So Dr. Legg, thank you very, very much. We also want to make sure we thank the Tibbs, who was here today. Thank you so much for your support. MCM, thank you for your support. This council staff, thank you so much for your support. And always our colleague, and couldn't do anything without her, Selena Singleton, thank you so much for your support. We also want to thank them folks over in our Public Information Office. Is Jen still here? Garfinkel? There she is. Please stand up and be recognized on behalf of your organization. Thank you. And also, obviously, the County Executive's Office. And again, we want to extend to him our best wishes for a speedy recovery and getting back to us as soon as absolutely possible. So thank you all for that. Again, Council President Stewart, we've been here today. Also, she had a conflict. I want to make sure also to share that with all of you as well. And the same thing goes for Councilmember Katz, Sales, Balcom, Albanos, and Glass. I think I've got everybody that responded to us. So thank them all in their absence again. Let me just very quickly also share with you that we've got one more task to do in this whole piece. So I hope as council consider all the demands on it as well as administration. One of our tasks was to create a monument that might in fact recognize all three men here in some place where we could build an educational piece around that monument. And so we hope then that there'll be resources up ahead that will allow us to do that, to complete the work, and be in a position then to make sure then that for generations to come, they'll be able to come by, see, and reflect. I'm so glad that, again, Chair, thank you, Madam Chair, for your work and your guidance in this program today. And also you having mentioned that, please go back. We wanted to do a bench. And where's Aisha? Please stand up, Ms. Satterwhite. Please stand up and be recognized. She was the design inspiration for all that you see out there, and the urging of our chair, Jason Green, who really pushed us forward and a marvelous job in moving this whole commission forward. Had it not been for him, we would not be here today. So I'm going to make sure you give him his due credit. And to both of you, thank you so much. But it was in that reflection, because what we're supposed to do is actually sit on that bench and just take a few minutes and you read the actual inscription. But more than that, think about that if that was your son, your uncle, your relative, or just a friend that you knew, and to have left this world in that kind of way. There was a horrible, horrible murder that did take place in the community, killing both the man and woman in this particular family and also injuring their daughter. So there was something that happened. There was something that occurred. But the reaction was to find a Negro. That was the answer. So as you sit there and reflect, take us now to the next hardest part of our work, and that's reconciliation. Dr. Legg has already asked for and is trying to really find their way through a reconciliation pathway. But it's one for us as well. And I'll leave with this, and I often quote Dr. King because I just think he had his hand always on the pulse of humanity. And he said this: don't let any man pull you so low as to hate them. We must use the weapon of love. We must have compassion and understanding for those who hate us, the heavy lifting. We must realize so many people are taught to hate us that they are not totally responsible for their hate. And here is a big push. But we stand in life today at a midnight. We are always, my friends, on the threshold of a new dawn. In Montgomery County, we can be on the threshold of a new dawn. And that's the tremendously hard work of reconciliation. Remember, absolutely. Document, absolutely. How do we get to tomorrow? Thank you all for being here. We've got a wonderful reception for you on the 4th floor. We'll ask those who are part of the program, please come up and take some photos real quickly. Everybody else, please go to the 4th floor on the elevator. I'll take you up for a reception. Thank you all very, very much for this powerful, powerful program. Thank you all.